Well, now we have Lizzie and David who are going to be jumping in here any moment now. I'm promoting them to co-host. They'll be able to jump in now and start sharing their mic and their camera. There they are. There they were.
Oh,
There they are again. Oh, they're gone again.
oh,
Awesome. Well, there you guys
sorry.
are. Awesome. Well, we're super
Hey,
excited to hear everything you guys have to share. Sorry, we're a couple minutes past, but yeah, thank you guys so much for taking the time today. Jump on here, and we can't wait.
no worries.
All
Hi,
right, I'm gonna
everyone.
disappear now, so you guys can go for it.
No worries. All right, I'm just gonna share some video. Oops, sorry, technicalities. We'll just go back and start. Hi, everyone. Good morning from Australia.
Hey everyone, how's it going? You guys can hear us okay?
That should be fine. Um, sorry, early mornings for us in Australia. So let's have a look at the chat. Oh, they can hear us well. All right.
All right, we're
Perfect.
good? Yes, so greetings and salutations from southeastern Australia. We're in Victoria, for those of you who are familiar with Australia. And it's awesome to be able to talk to you. And we're going to share basically our story and hopefully give you some salient takeaway points at the end of our presentation. So let's begin. Alrighty. So we basically we met and we lived in Hong Kong for a long while. I was there from 2003 to 2021, and that's where I met Lizzie. And funnily enough, our journey towards living in a tiny house started with me getting right involved with prepping because we had around about 2017, we had the protests and demonstrations in Hong Kong. Climate change was ramping up, so it was becoming a bit doom and gloom. And so I had visions of, you know, uh, building go bags and escaping from a zombie apocalypse in Hong Kong, and escaping to where? Once I got down to the bottom of that rabbit hole, it didn't really make sense. So we basically went on to discover the tiny house movement, which was a lot more healthy. And yeah, so I'm originally from Australia. Now, every year during the time I was in Hong Kong, I'd come back to Australia and look around and go, am I ready to move back from Hong Kong to Australia? And pretty well every year it was no, because Hong Kong was such a great place to be until 2019. And I turned to Lizzie and said, do you want to move to Australia? Because it's looking pretty good here now. And that's what we did. So that brings us to the St. Ives in Sydney tiny home carnival in the March 2020, and that's where everything changed pretty well. This was just before COVID hit, and so as you can see, we met some of our heroes. We had Zach and John from Tiny House Nation.
Bryce.
We had Bryce from Big Living in a Tiny House. And I think it was Fred Schultz, who was one of our main gurus. And I think it was Fred's presentation where he said, can I see by a show of hands who is considering living in a tiny house for real? And I found myself staring at my raised hand and thinking, oh God, we're doing it. This is it. So that was pretty well where it all started. And so we basically worked towards moving back to Australia from Hong Kong. Got here in 2021 after some struggles, and basically, interesting side story here. I'll keep it brief, but we landed in Sydney and we did our 2-week quarantine. And then halfway through this 2-week quarantine, Sydney announced its first major lockdown. So we were due to stay with my mother in her single bedroom apartment, beautiful apartment, in North Sydney for 2 weeks. And we ended up staying there for, I think she counted it out at about 115 days. So yeah, that was pretty intense. Anyway, so that's how we end that. And Sorry, I'm going to let Lizzie have a chat now.
No, sorry, I had to stop sharing so that we can see you and you can see us and also present the presentation. So I'll just, oops. I am so sorry having trouble with this morning with our presentation, guys. Okay, we're back to it. Sorry.
Yep. So we're back to, yeah. All right. So basically, we when we got to Australia, one of the first things we did, well, first up, we're going to talk to you about why go tiny. Now, most people talk about reduced carbon footprint. They talk about it being more affordable. They talk about maneuverability. But the takeaway point for me really was the act of building your own structure and shelter. That to me was one of the greatest things I've ever done as a human being, and I highly recommend everyone to give it a go. So yeah, that was fantastic.
And take note, we built our tiny house without any experience at all. David was in fitness, I was in events marketing, and yeah, I just came to it and just started.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
doing this.
yeah. And we basically started, so the three areas that helped us start. So obviously YouTube, we were huge fans of, as we mentioned before, Bryce from Big Living in a Tiny House, Zach and John in Tiny House Nation, and Fred Schultz in Fred's Tiny Houses. So the first two were our inspiration, which incidentally, one of Bryce's videos is where we came up for the design of this place. I always stumble across this. It's some highly complicated word in Maori from New Zealand. And then it was Fred who gave us the online course to how to build your own tiny house. And also the he's simply one of the best tiny house trailer builders in Australia. So they were the three areas that kind of launched us. So I highly recommend finding those areas of inspiration. And then we got really lucky, didn't we? So
Yeah.
so basically, when COVID became a little bit lax, we were originally trying to get to Tasmania. And for those of you who don't know where that is, that's a little island right in the southeast of Australia. So we started traveling downwards, and we essentially visited a place in the New South Wales Victorian border of a friend of a friend who said, yeah, you can stay with me for a couple of days. And this is where we met. So he basically said, look, I've got someone you might be interested in meeting. And that's where we met Ray, who essentially had built his own gypsy caravan like 20 years ago and had it stored in a huge shed in his backyard. So Ray, essentially, we met him and had a great time. And he said, you should build your tiny house next to my gypsy caravan in my huge shed. And then the gentleman who we were staying with for the 2 days initially, John, he said, well, why don't you live with me and build your tiny house with Ray? And that was about 5 minutes drive from each other.
Yeah, and it was great because it's very serendipitous that we meet all these people that kind of help us with what we basically manifested.
Sheer luck.
Yeah. And
you want to talk about manifestation?
Yeah, well, those are the things that actually inspired us to doing this or help us go through the build is our manifestations and meditation. So
yeah, it's a morning thing, and it's helped us a lot.
Yeah, so if you're planning to build, it really is very important to have that focus and mindset that will help you go through it. Especially there are decisions that you'll have to make that can be challenging and testing to a relationship, for example.
Yes.
And we will see a slide about the relationships and communities in our presentation shortly. I'll just go forward.
Yep. You want me to kick on here?
And the other thing that before we go forward, the other thing that helped us through our startup is the design.
Yes.
David actually had to learn while we were in Hong Kong SketchUp.
Yeah, I
Um,
highly recommend SketchUp. It's just such an awesome tool.
and mind you, he doesn't really like anything technical or
No. So my initial
yeah.
design of our tiny house, which is still relevant, was on pencil and paper. And then yeah, we we developed. We progressed to SketchUp, and then I finally bought SketchUp Pro, which is just awesome. So yeah, that took the design process, and I highly recommend people do this. You got to spend some time on design. It has to be, because we look at, this is our forever house basically for now, as Alexis and Christian referred to before. And so we wanted it to be as perfect as we could. And
For
so
us.
for us, yeah, exactly. So that's what we did.
That's us.
Yep.
And that's a build and the progression.
Yeah.
Um,
So let's move on. And so back to Fred Schultz and his fantastic trailers. Now, Fred probably builds one of the best trailers in Australia. And
he's originally from the States.
he is originally from the States, but he now lives in a place called Castlemaine in Victoria. And he also has a fantastic online course. And he has a thing called the Universal Construction Method, the UCM.
Which is trademarked.
Trademarked,
Yeah,
and it's just a brilliant sort of foundation to build. I didn't mean to say that, to build your tiny house on it, but it is.
Yeah.
So that was a great start. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about, now, once again, Alexis and Christian touched on this too. During the build, we didn't use recycled materials. They are tough to work with sometimes because you've got to kind of design your build around the recycled materials.
Yeah.
What we opted for was, we as again, luck. We were a 4-minute drive from our build site in the shed to the local two major hardware stores. And then we had our vehicle was a ute with a big tray on the back and ladder racks, so it was perfect for that 4-minute drive. So yeah, in terms of recycled materials, if you want to use that term, can I talk about this now with our internal 15 mil ply?
Yeah.
The 33 sheets. So we found reject plywood from someone who used to work at a sawmill. So 33 sheets of 15 mil structural ply that we used for the internal walls of the tiny house. Now that's a little on the heavy side for traditional tiny house build, but we did it because of its permanence and its strength, because we wanted something that was going to last. So that was as close as we got to recycled.
Yeah, and just backing up, because we're first time builders, wood is just so much more forgiving than metal is. So ideally, if we would have to do it again, we will go for metal as our framework. But as a first timer, wood was the best for us, because then we can just chuck it and we can do it again.
Mistakes.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do now is go to during the build and support mechanisms, and you can see in this picture here. So even though we DIY'd as much as we could, it's super important to get help from professionals. So our first and foremost professional was Harry, who you can see here in the high vis. And Harry is a master builder of 45 years experience. And Harry's, just let me clarify here, Harry is not a cheap date. And because he was so expensive, we'd get him in for just like a day. Yeah. But he became like a mentor for me, and I sucked up the information that he would give because I knew he was solid. And he helped us do so simple things like putting on the bracing layer here over our stud work, our framework, and getting it all plumbed up properly and
squaring the tiny house.
Those are the
things that we never really thought about.
No, exactly.
Yeah, and the roofing.
and putting in our treasured 3 skylights into the roofing. That was all Harry's department. So that was fantastic. And then, of course, you've got to get so plumbing and more
An
and
electrician.
electricians. You need to use those guys for all of that stuff. Now, one thing I will say about so the guys we got for the initial build for the roughing in and then the final stages was great, except for the plumbers and our internal gas work. So we've got LPG for our stove and oven, and LPG for our on-demand gas hot water heater, because we wanted to save the solar bank that we'd eventually put in from being sucked dry too fast. Now, our plumbers, as fantastic as they were, would not sign off on any internal gas work because it fell into that gray area of you're essentially working with a caravan, which a lot of people, that's still where people are with what a tiny house is. Oh, it's a caravan. So
and just to clarify, this is in Australia. I don't know if it's the same in the US.
Yeah, no, true.
So,
but we were saved by a plumber that we came into contact with later on, who, and I quote, said to us, "I'm amazed that you haven't blown yourselves up yet." And he fixed all of our things, like simple things like for if you want to use a gas stove and oven on LPG, which is the tanks, small tanks, rather than the live gas coming through from the mains, you have to change all the jets on the burners. So it was just simple stuff like that, and checking for leaks, and yeah. So go for your professionals when you need them. Yeah. So, and then we yep, and right.
And we've got these are the people who actually help us. It's very important to have that community and friends and families as well.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the first places that we took the tiny house to was a caravan park, and that was a great interim position while we were looking for our permanent parking position, the Triple P. And one of the gentlemen that we met at the caravan park was the farmer from next door,
Ross.
Yeah. Whose tractor you can see here. So
no, this is actually here.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. Anyway, back to Ross. He towed us around that caravan park about 3 shifts during a 14-month period. So invaluable guy to know.
And
yes,
it's good to be friends with your neighbors and make sure that you don't go on their bad side. That's one of the things that
absolutely.
It's very, very important here because of the council and regulations, which we will go through next.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's discuss. During this time, when you're looking for a permanent parking position, I like using that term because that's essentially what we were looking for. But if you don't have family and friends with serious acreage who are willing to have you, it's probably one of the stressiest things that you'll try and achieve with living in a tiny house. And I like to call ourselves one-hit wonders because we just want a permanent parking spot. Our tiny house, the dimensions are a little bit too big. It's 8-meter length, and it's 2.5 wide. Yep, and we're twin lofted,
3.4.
so it's not a tiny house that you tow easily. So we basically wanted what we've got now, which is we're settled in.
Yeah, and it's easier to tow on the road. You don't have to get special permits for oversized. It's just under the road regulations.
It's to spec with the road regulations. So that brings us to where we are now and how we got here. So we stumbled upon a website called parkmytinyhouse.com, which you can see on the screen there. Now, they are super cool, and I'm sure you've got similar things in America, but these people were kind of like brokers who would go, right, matchmakers, brokers. So they hooked us up with our current landlord, who has a 500-acre farm and was willing to have a tiny house on the acreage. Now, couple of caveats here. So it sounds great on paper. You think, yes, we like you, you like us. We're going to move onto your land. We'll rent your land, and this is the dream. Doesn't come as easily as that most of the time. So, for example, one of the major things that happened was that the site that we picked on this 500-acre farm was obviously the site that had the best view in the world, but it was also looking straight down onto the neighbours across the road at their front gate and certain portion of their land. Now, we didn't communicate with the neighbour about, oh, hi, we're going to park a really tall grey tiny house that you're going to be able to see every time you drive out of your front gate. And they got really upset when we arrived on the day that we moved in. So we had negotiations, and it was a bit of pill to swallow, because we moved basically 80 to 100 meters away from where we had initially decided to park the tiny, and we'd put in an access road, we'd gravelled it, we'd put in a drainage, we'd put in hard work, you know, we put in all the foundation work, sleepers with gravel and brick underneath them all, and all the stuff you do. And our neighbour, fantastic guy, he said, look, don't worry, we'll help you relocate. And they did. They were amazing. And they've since become one of our,
I would say best friends.
Best friends,
Yeah.
and also an amazing
resource for information.
Yeah. So they essentially, their son helped us dig the new drainage ditches and put that in. He himself helped us put down like cement foundations for our veranda, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And so they've now become assets rather than, because in the beginning of our relationship, their line was basically, if you don't move your tiny house, we will report you to the local council.
So, which brings us to the quote that we always tell everyone, and
well, we always got told.
We got told first, and then now we advocate it.
Yeah, so this one's touchy because councils around the world are never easy to deal with tiny houses at the moment, but it's going to get better. So the adage that it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission holds true, and we've heard it from so many different people who are professional. And what basically the takeaway here is with the councils, you got to know your local council laws. And it's just, so the thing with us, the thing with me is that the stuff that local council wants you to do goes against what you feel in your gut and common sense a lot of the time. It's just like, well, it doesn't make sense what you're asking. You're just trying to charge us for permits and money. So one of the main things with avoiding council is you've got to be friends with all your neighbours. So the only way that
doesn't only have to be your neighbors, but you just always have to be kind to to everyone.
Yeah. You're
find that perfect medium.
Yeah.
Too.
So yes, there's the local council stuff and our neighbours. So that's all good now where we are. So we essentially rent a quarter of an acre for very reasonable rate of rent, and yeah, it's we have,
and it's no difference for us, it's no difference to living where we were in Hong Kong, because our,
oh yeah, absolutely, it's way cheaper than Hong Kong.
And also the space is kind of similar, although now I think we are a bit more luxurious in a way that, we have our own.
Yeah.
I have my own bath.
Yeah, no,
and
exactly.
we have the veranda, so which we couldn't afford to do so when we were in Hong Kong.
Unthinkable.
So, yeah.
Now it is worth mentioning briefly the gentleman and his wife who towed us, Rick's Towing, who we were introduced to through Fred Schultz's business.
Yeah.
And he has you can see it on the screen there. He's got a Unimog there that he tows. He basically is, just to give you
that's right
there it is.
You can see.
So his towing business, he does a lot of different types of towing, but he specializes in tiny house towing, and he's essentially doing one tiny house a day, and he has for a couple of years now. So just to give you an idea of how busy the tiny house movement has become.
Not as fast as the States yet.
We still trail behind the States, who were obviously the originators of the tiny house movement, Jay Schaefer. And yeah, so it really is worth getting your tiny house towed by a professional in a vehicle that is designed to tow tiny houses.
Yeah, because we've heard horror stories.
Yeah, and you
about,
just and this is stress, guys. For those of you who haven't towed the tiny house yet, it's stress, quiet, unforgiving stress in the background the whole time it's being towed. Yeah.
But yeah, they made us comfortable because they know what they're doing. They were able to kind of help us calm down during the process. So it's important to have, for us, important to have this very credible towing company.
Yes. Alrighty. Let's move on to what we've all from the start. We wanted to go off grid. Now, the most attractive thing for us going off grid was that feeling that you don't have to depend on not anyone, but you don't have to depend on outside sources for all your power, your water, your gas, all that sort of stuff. You're not on the grid. And so what we've done essentially, and we highly recommend this, we've gone solar, we've gone LPG gas, and we've also gone rainwater catchment. And it's also worth mentioning, because billionaires need as much help as they can, Elon Musk's fantastic Starlink system for all our, and you can see that here in the background, just over the tank, you'll see the little dish sticking up. So we've pretty well got everything there. And I'd just like to touch on our off-grid bits and pieces and give you what we consider the main points with each one of these. So starting with solar, highly recommend solar. Solar technology is changing so fast and panels are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So our advice to you is we spend a lot of money on the solar portion of our tiny house living, and it's highly worth it. Excuse me. We've got great batteries and inverter system. We've got a backup diesel generator. We've got some really powerful panels, and yeah, it's just worth doing. So
yeah, especially in our area where we're in, like, we don't have neighbors around us, and well, we have one, but it's quite far still. We get blackouts in here.
As in power blackouts.
Power blackouts.
Yeah.
So it's really very good to have, to be what am I trying to say?
It's good to be independent.
Independent.
And not have to worry about whether the power grid's gone down or not.
Yeah, and make my colleagues jealous for when they don't have any electricity or power.
Now,
say, I'm here.
Exactly.
We have power and internet.
Interestingly enough, because people are always saying, oh, you've got to put in extra panels eventually. And at the moment, we're looking at putting in a wind turbine instead, because we get really strong winds here, especially at night. So it kind of works out perfect tandem type green energy.
So so the point here as well is to make sure that you build your tiny house within your environment. What's happening? You have to think what's happening around you, on what can you take
Yes, exactly.
An advantage for you, or you can utilize. For example, for us, it's the wind. Oh, what can we do with the wind? Because it scares me at night when it sways.
Yep. And the only other thing I would say about solar is make sure your panels are positioned at the right tilt for wherever you are in the world, and at the right. We've got ours facing slightly. We're northwest, so we get the late afternoon sun. They're positioned really, really well. We get fantastic coverage. So moving right along, let's have a look at grey water recycling. Now, grey water recycling, I got to say, if I could go back in time, I would get a bigger tank. So we've got a 5,000 litre tank. We should have doubled that and got a 10. Because we're in thirsty land here, and you really need to have your water supply sorted. I'm not sure what that is in gallons for you guys, but so what you're looking at there is a 5,000 litre tank. And then the other, what we did, now this is a bit of a one of the deal breakers when we designed the tiny house and agreed to live in a tiny house, was a veranda. Because verandas, it's almost doubled our living space, and it's almost doubled our rainwater catchment, because we don't have a lot of roof in a in a 2.5 by 8 meter rectangle. So yeah, the veranda was huge for that. That's increased our rainwater catchment, and it also makes our tiny house a lot cooler to live in during summer. All righty, we got to speed on because we're just about out of time. Gosh, that went fast. A couple of other things let's talk about where we're heading. LPG gas, don't really need to talk to you about that. We highly recommend the hot water on demand and the stove and the oven. It's awesome. It saves us, as I said, a lot of solar. And where we're going now is we're basically, next for us is becoming self-sufficient as well as off-grid, which is our 1/4 of an acre full of raised garden beds and vegetables. Fruit trees. We're going to put a pond in. We're going to have chooks.
Chooks is chickens.
Chickens, sorry. Yeah, that's a very Australian term. Chickens. Yes, so that's what we're doing next. And we really are, to quote an Australian term, guys, living the dream. We highly recommend it. It's great. It's just a worthwhile purpose to have in your life. All right. Do we need to mention anything else?
That's pretty much everything. I'm sorry about the technical issues in the beginning. Okay. And actually, that's all about that we have to share today. If you guys have any questions for us,
send them through.
Send them through. We'll be happy to share.
There's a picture of our cats.
Yes, we do have 2 little cats that adopted us. Both of them in 2 different places that we lived in.
Yeah, we didn't purchase these cats or anything like that. They adopted us.
Yeah. So anyway, if you have any questions for us, please feel free to connect with us in our website, or mostly we've shared most of our stories of our build in our Instagram, which you can see in here. And we'd be happy to get connected with you guys and continue building our community of tiny house relations.
Yep. And just a huge thank you for allowing us to do this presentation. It's been really cool because this is stuff we love talking about.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, thank you guys so much. We love it, and we also really appreciate your guys' accents that you guys brought. It's amazing. It brings the Australian. It makes us feel like we're in Australia. What did you call chickens?
Chooks.
Chooks.
CHOOKS. Chooks.
Chooks. Okay, that's so funny. I've never heard that before. So
there you go. So I want you to use it at least 3 times today in conversation.
I'll try. Yes, I will try. I'll aim to do that. So, awesome, you guys. Well, thanks so much for giving us your inspiring story. It's super cool to see kind of every single aspect, the steps along the way, and the process that you guys went through. And even it was cool to kind of see how it worked out for you guys. And you guys started. It's something that actually Alexis and Christian were just saying, like, they needed a place to build their tiny home. They said, just start chatting with people, just start talking about it. And one connection led to the next one, which led to the next, and just kind of unfolded perfectly. Yep. So love to hear that. Super cool.
Cool.
Awesome, you guys. Well, yeah, we really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking the time today to share with us all of your guys' kind of experience in doing that.